Hello and good morning, everyone. This is Chris at Inflow Communications. I want to thank you for joining our session today. Today's session is pretty exciting for me. It's one of the more enthusiastic and fun sessions that I do because it gives me the opportunity to think outside the box. And I want to share with you today some of the solutions that we've put to use for clients using Genesys Cloud. In my opinion, when you look at technology, technology has a lot of gateways to broaden the solution far beyond what the solution actually offers. And I hope today you take away a new thought process for rethinking your solutions. With that said, as you know, Inflow Communications is very much focused on education and sharing the knowledge that we have experienced over our many years. And we have 2 more webinars coming up very soon. On June the 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to delve into Genesys Cloud 101 and offer some user training. On the 16th of June, also at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to go into Genesys Cloud and offer some call flow concepts, giving you some good information to really feel comfortable with your solution and more, hopefully. So we look forward to seeing you on those sessions. By way of introduction today, my name is Chris Riccio. I may have met some of you and I may have worked with you on some of these solutions that we're about to highlight. I've been in the industry 25 plus years. I've worked on the technical side and I've always been associated with contact center and contact center technology, and technology in general with what's happening today is really exciting to me. And so I'm always looking for the latest and greatest and what I can actually do with it. My personal mantra: it's not what the contact center solution can do, it's what you can do with what the contact center solution can do. With me today, as was with me earlier this week on Tuesday, is Luis Sauceda, who is our sales project coordinator, who has many years experience, 7+ years. So Luis, if you'd like to say hello this morning.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Chris. I hope everyone enjoys today's webinar.
Thanks, Luis. And Luis is always a great and tremendous help in coordinating these sessions, and he will act as moderator as well. Should you have any questions, pose them in the chat box on the right or wherever you have dragged the widget, and let's get into our agenda for today. So today we're going to cover introductions. We'll talk about Inflow Communications. Who is Inflow? Most of you probably know Inflow Communications already, which is why you landed here, and we're glad to have you joining us. Today we're going to cover some creative contact center solutions, just kind of an overview on the thought process, how to get there. Most of these solutions come to us, and the need to think creatively is because clients have daily operational obstacles. We'll talk a little bit about some of the obstacles that they might encounter, and ultimately we're going to back into the Genesys Cloud feature set. One of the key and shining examples of the Genesys Cloud feature set is that it is open, and I'd like to leave you today with what that really means. I also want to give you a starting point. Where do I start? That's the most common questions. When you're thinking about bringing a solution to the table, how do I use the tools at my disposal to let me create a creative solution that is both efficient and streamlines the process? Ultimately, my goal whenever I'm looking at solution development is how can I make it user and easy for the end user and simple to associate and make tasks happen. We'll then delve into 3 specific use cases. Now I have quite a bit of use cases, so I had to narrow it down to 3. The 3 I chose were for simplicity in mind, but also to get you to think about administrators and the task that the operations team, contact center directors and supervisors, are tasked with. And then we'll get into summary and then QA. And one of those use cases I'm pretty excited about. It's a more recent one. So who is Inflow Communications? Most of you know us, but we are solely focused on unified communications and contact center solutions. We're not interested in selling everything under the sun as far as technology is concerned. We're laser focused on unified communications and contact center. That focus allows us to become experts at our craft, and most of the folks here that support the contact center, either on the support team or sales team or myself, have all come from the contact center industry and have countless years of experience. We do have offices across the US in 10 different states and employees scattered across the US. We are a remote company and we all work remotely, but we are tightly unified. do support over 200,000 endpoints and 800 customers, and we grow customers at a very successful clip on a regular basis. And ultimately, we're maniacal about customer service. My personal hope is that every interaction that you've had with Inflow Communication has been a great experience. And if not, we do love to hear from you. We're always doing after interaction surveys. And one of our claims to our success is that we have an 8 times faster response time and guarantee than the industry average. And we hope that you've had an excellent experience with us. Here's just a smattering of some of our clients that you may know: Domino's, Zillow, ThyssenKrupp, and Driscoll's. One of these clients has an international footprint into the UK, Germany, and Brazil. And we do have quite a few clients that maintain operations in Honduras, Mexico, Philippines, and beyond. So we do have a good global footprint. So let's get into today's discussion, which is creative contact center solutions using Genesys Cloud. On a day-to-day basis, when I work with clients, clients always have unique needs, and no two clients are the same. When it comes to contact center technology, most of the clients think of it as a black and white application. Calls come in, interactions come in, and that's usually the extent of how individuals and users experience the contact center solution. But when I really look at customers and I hear what customers are looking for, many times they come to us, to myself, or to our team, and they're looking to resolve cumbersome processes, even cumbersome processes that may take 3 or 4 levels deep in a point and click strategy that could otherwise be streamlined. And so my goal in developing a solution is to ease the administration for users, take a cumbersome process, make it easy. Also, hopefully we have some IT folks on the session today, reduce reliance upon IT or technical staff. One of the things that plagues contact center is that the folks on the floor who are dealing face-to-face with customers have a persistent need to be able to make changes on the fly, and that often results in their having to make configuration changes or some other change on the fly that otherwise has to involve IT. Having been in IT, I'm a big fan of creating solutions that eases the need to reach out to IT and puts the control at the user's fingertips. I will share these solutions with IT folks as I develop them and put them together so that they understand that the solution has all the prerequisites of security and ease of use in mind for the end user. Ultimately, for the end user who's working with customers, the goal is to improve response time that impacts the overall customer experience. And what that means to everyone can be quite different. Oftentimes when we're looking to improve response time, we need to think outside the box in terms of what the contact center provides, in terms of routing interactions, prioritizing interactions, making sure or finding agents are available. But a lot of times there's a reliance upon event triggers and workflow. Oftentimes a scenario may be taking place that we need to call another scenario to invoke a response, so we can either get more assistance, change a priority, or move data around, or what I call data orchestration. Orchestrate data in a way that creates a streamlined experience, not only for the user, the agent, and the supervisor or manager, but also for the customer. And hopefully today we'll give you a sample of some of those. So let's talk about the Genesys Cloud feature set. My general and really deep impression of Genesys Cloud feature set is that I have unrestricted application communication. When I look at contact center solutions, one of my pillars is I have to be able to reach out to any application in the free world with ease. It's an understanding of myself, and it's something I've learned over my years being in the industry, that no matter what solution comes out, there's always an opportunity to extend beyond that solution. When we looked at Genesys Cloud, we found that it had some of the key pillars: open-ended access. Number one, integration is a standard. That's the number one thing I look for in any contact center solution. Integration has to be standard, and it shouldn't require that we have to reach out to heavy developers to create a solution. Number two, one of the things I enjoyed most and appreciate about Genesys Cloud is that it has built-in web services plugin. Now, I'm using the term plugin loosely, but I jokingly tell folks I should be able to point and click my way to happiness. I shouldn't have to reach out to 3 or 4 other individuals to get to a success point. And having the built-in web services plugin essentially means that I can communicate with any application in the free world. That gives me unlimited opportunity to create workflow processes, data flow processes, customer engagement processes, if we think about the bigger picture. Additionally, there's built-in Genesys Cloud Web Services plugin, and this is different than the web service plugin I just mentioned. Within Genesys, there's a lot of things that happen in the contact center solution. Calls are placed on hold, calls are in queue, interactions are in queue, agents may or may not be available, we want to schedule callbacks, things of that nature. One of the critical things that I find very powerful in moving interactions and responding to interactions dynamically is that I need to see what is happening within the system. A lot of systems out there do not give you the ability to do things such as, what's the average wait time in this queue? Or is that agent available? And if that agent isn't available, is their manager available? If that manager is not available, can I go elsewhere? Having the ability to look at itself is really key here so that I can look at conditions within Genesys Cloud to decide if I need to seek assistance somewhere else. This is a big advantage. Another option and feature inside Genesys Cloud is built-in data tables. Now, when I think of data tables, most of us are familiar in the terms of an Excel spreadsheet. That ultimately is a data table. And we think of a data table as something sort of cryptic. It might have my CRM data, a ticketing system service request information data, an order entry data. But what's nice about Genesys Cloud is that built-in data tables allow me to catalog information in the manner that we've used to, but more importantly, it allows me to rethink how I use the data structure to help ease some administration. And my examples today are going to show you how I'm using data tables in a very different way rather than storing CRM data, order entry data, etc. Another aspect of Genesys Cloud is an open API. The API is wide open. They have a website dedicated to it, very well documented. Why I like this? The open API allows me to use the Genesys Cloud Web Services plugin I mentioned a moment ago, so I can craft and build scenarios not already in the product that may be of particular interest to my use case. So for example, I want to do a callback, but I don't want to use the built-in callback feature set. I want to schedule a callback, send it to Salesforce, put a ticker inside Salesforce as an action task to the account owner, etc. So having the open API lets me strategically look at how I can use that data within Genesys and populate it elsewhere to, in effect, a workflow process. Ultimately, what ends up happening with Genesys and the feature sets I've mentioned is that I have open communication to almost any application in the free world. This is what I want. This is what clients want, and Genesys gives you that capability. And lastly, one of the pieces of the puzzle is agent desktop scripting, also a native feature set in Genesys Cloud. With agent desktop scripting, it allows me to pool all of these pieces I just mentioned together in a single user interface. That is extremely powerful, and in a moment I'm going to show you some use cases. Hopefully that'll get you thinking about your environment, what's particular about your environment, and addressing some of the operational obstacles you may encounter. So I'll stop here, Luis, just for a moment and ask if there are any questions before we get into where to start.
No, we don't have any questions yet.
Excellent, and that gave me an opportunity to take a drink, so thank you. So where to start? So when I'm talking about solutions and you think about your environment and your operational challenges and the many applications you communicate with, and that's really the key here. No matter what contact center solution you have, you're going to have to communicate with multiple applications. So when you're building a strategy, where do I start? A good flow that and strategy that I always look at is, where is the data? Where's the data I'm reaching? Where's the data that I need to send? And how do I get there? Next is, what is the action? What do I need to do with data? Do I need to send it somewhere, pull it somewhere, use it to make a decision about something else? That's a critical piece. So what is the action? What am I trying to accomplish? Next is, who needs to see it? Does the agent need to see it? Does IVR need to see it? Does my CRM need to see it? Or does some other completely unrelated service need to see my data? And ultimately, what's the goal? Am I trying to make things streamlined? Am I trying to trigger several events so I can notify multiple applications of a change in status? What's the goal? Mapping these out will help you sort of back into what pieces to bring to the table. Next, once you've had your map and your design, or at least a thought process, and you don't have to have a strict design, if you need assistance, this is where Inflow comes in handy. This is where I come in handy. I do a lot of what if scenarios analysis with clients to help them come up with an ultimate solution. And then together we look at the power of Genesys features and leverage those to orchestrate data manipulation so that we can create a really streamlined experience for clients. So the first part is usually, can we use a web service, or does it require that we use a web service? Obviously, most of the time when you're talking about data, you're going to invoke a web service. This is nice having Genesys built-in web service. I just need to alter my web service to meet the need. And then can we use the data, Genesys Cloud data? If part of my transaction that I'm trying to solve is in nature of using the data to find something specific, for example, if my client is reaching out to the contact center, regardless of communication, if I can see that that client is associated with Luis and Luis is the account manager, before I send that activity to Luis, I want to see if Luis is available. Because if Luis isn't available, I want to send that communication somewhere else. This is where the Genesys data comes in handy. I can look at the status of a user and see exactly what's their current status and where they might be in their workflow during the day. Next, what about a data table? When I talk about the data table again, is it possible to streamline some of the endpoints or entry points in a data table to make it systematically easier? For two pieces. Make it easier for the flow process to go grab the information, but also the most important piece, make it easy for the manager or the supervisor to make changes without involving IT. In a minute, you're going to see an example that will express that. And lastly, can we automate the action? Is there a way to automate to create a trigger so that I don't have to think about these things? I've already laid the groundwork what I want to have accomplished, and I want to automate it now. Automation is going to take you farther than any other process, and my end goal for any solution is, can we automate it? Think about it once, deliver it forever. So let's get into some common use cases. These will go pretty swiftly. We have about 15 minutes left here. And when I think about use cases, I'm always thinking, how do I satisfy the customer request? It usually involves a level of creative thinking. But ultimately, no matter what I do, the biggest mistakes most folks make about solutions is it's complicated. My goal with any solution is it's got to be simple, it's got to be easy, and it has to be practical. There's no benefit in creating a solution that's so complicated it requires IT. The goal here, make it simple for the end user so they can continue doing what they do best, which is interacting with your clients. So let's get to use case number one, emergency routing administration. This is a customer that needed to have an ability to change how they impact emergency routing. The problem was the contact center manager needed a way to turn on and off emergency routing without having to log into Genesys Cloud to do this. The key issue here is that the manager was not always logged in to the application, or they weren't in front of the Genesys Cloud application, either because they were in a meeting or they were off-site and it just wasn't convenient. From a contact center perspective, there are ways to get around this. Our ultimate goal was to make this as easy as possible for the end user. The answer was, we did a few things. Number one, we configured the data tables inside Genesys Cloud for access and security purposes. I'm going to show that to you in a moment. We also configured a Genesys Cloud data action. This is a web service pointed directly at Genesys. What we're ultimately doing here is saying, hey, if a request was made, which service do I turn on or off, and where do I send it when it's on or off? Next, we deployed a text or an SMS architect flow for admin purposes. I am a huge fan of taking IVR and turning it on its head. Instead of using IVR or architect call flow process to route interactions, I'm going to use it as an administration portal so that a user, such as a manager, will have a designated route or IVR, which will trigger multiple services to do things that otherwise you have to do inside the application. Hopefully in a moment this will make sense. And then I configured Architect to handle the request. So we're pulling in 3 elements, actually 4 elements together. So here's where we started. Inside Genesys Cloud, you may or may not know that there's an emergency routing option found under routing and emergencies. You can see here that I've got 2 emergency groups. One is CCSM group and one is a test group. On the far right, if I activate or deactivate the process, it will invoke emergency routing. A classic example. If I turn on emergency routing, calls will no longer come into the contact center, but instead go to an overflow center. This is very common for most facilities where in an emergency status that they just need to reroute calls, they'll trigger this. Problem here for this customer, at the time they had an occurrence and an incident, the customer wasn't able to log into Pure Cloud. They were away at home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they needed a way to transfer and move calls about. It became cumbersome for her, and we came up with the process to facilitate that. First thing we did is we went into data tables in Pure Cloud. The data tables in Pure Cloud allows me to create something very specific. In my case here, I created an emergency toggle table. Ultimately, in this table, the only thing I listed there was the user's cell phone number. Now, the user's cell phone number is written in plain text. Anyone that has permissions here can just change the number and give or allow access. If you have users 1, 2, 3, or 10, enter all their cell phone numbers into this data table. This acts as security. If you want to deny a user from access, just remove their phone number. They no longer can turn this feature set on or off. So this acts as security. Now, this table purposely is very simplistic. Next, under integrations in Pure Cloud, I went into the integrations and created several actions. One, I wanted to get the current status of emergency routing. There are some specific details I need from that query. Secondarily, I will create an emergency on routing web service, and then I will also create an emergency routing off web service. Depending on the interaction of the user, we will invoke one of these web services to turn emergency routing on or off. Next, in my flow, my IVR flow, which is pointed directly at texting, SMS texting, I had 2 branches. One for an on statement, one for an off statement. Now here's what ultimately happens with the flow process. We're giving explicit control to the manager to invoke emergency routing using their cell phone by sending a text. So in this example here, you can see they just send the text, and we purposely configured it to respond to the words on or off. What happens here is the text comes in, it hits the SMS flow on Genesys Cloud, which then looks at the data table. In that data table, it will approve or deny the user. The only way they can get approval is that if that cell phone number is found in that table. If the cell phone number is not found in the table, it will deny the request. If it is found in the data table, it will approve the request. And you'll notice here, after I look at the data, my approval request on the top on the right will say then I will go ahead and respond and then look at the word you sent me. Did you text me the word on, or did you text me the word off? If I was denied, the user will get a text message in response saying you are barred from this action. Please contact your administrator. The net result and the primary benefit of making this an easily invocable process is that the contact center manager had complete control at her fingertips without having to log into Genesys Cloud. That was the key obstacle here. Because most users have their cell phone with them no matter where they travel, she could effectively turn on and turn off emergency routing no matter where she is in the free world. It also gave the contact center manager an easy interface to add and remove cell phone users to allow access, and this didn't have to require IT. It's simple text-based. If she wants to remove a user, she removes their cell phone. If she wants to add a user, she adds a cell phone. Now you could extend this a little further by hitting another database and enter password, etc. In this case, it wasn't required, but this is a simple example of how we took an otherwise function that required you to log into Pure Cloud and made it accessible just through texting. So let's go into ad hoc, or use case number 2, which was on-call ad hoc staff request. Now this was a really interesting one, and I'm going to give you the outline here. What was the problem? The initial problem is the customer is a 24/7 injury hotline. That means they have to have professionals on staff in a contact center setting to deal with patients who are reporting injury. Another problem was that after-hours staffing was extremely difficult and expensive. The reason it's difficult is at this time, an after-hour staff who's handling an injury needed to be a specialist, a nurse, someone who has gone to school, a professional vocation, and they're quite expensive. Most nurses do not want to work a shift after hours from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. sitting in a queue waiting for something to happen. Also, it's expensive. That sort of talent is expensive. The other part of this equation is that the client typically after hours did not get a lot of report cases, but due to the nature of their business, somebody has to be available. So what do we do to help the customer? The answer was we configured a data table to assign on-call staff in a rotating fashion, meaning whatever number is in the data table will tell us who we should reach out to at the time we take the next action. Secondarily, and this is very similar to the one we just talked about, but it's slightly different. Secondarily, we did configure a Genesys Cloud data action, and we used the SMS API in Genesys Cloud to send a text message to the user, the technical staff person in after hours. Then we configured the architect flow to trigger the data action to send a request to the on-call technician, or in this case, a nurse, when the injury interaction arrives. Ultimately, as soon as the patient calls in, the text is sent to somebody off hours who receives the text, and that person then gets the text and logs into the triage queue. And there's a reason around that I'll talk about in a moment. And lastly, after hours staff is prompted to log in and wait for the patient. Now I'm going to walk you through the process of what we did here. We created a data table, which is very similar to what we just saw. However, in the data table, we created an on-call staff. The PIN reference was the cell phone number. We also created the name of the nurse and also what department they belong to. We can use these data points to make decisions about who, what, and where, and we can also present this data. So this is a data table that has more details, but it can absolutely be used beyond calling the user to make routing destinations, to look up people's availability and things of that nature. Next, we did create the Pure Cloud data action to send a real-time alert that a call has just arrived in queue that requires medical attention. Then, in the queue, when the call comes in, the first request is to trigger the action, send the request, and then put the caller in queue. Now, here's how the flow process worked. The injured patient would call in. The flow would go to the data table and it would grab the name and information of the person that we need to reach, who's going to be a nurse. The text then is sent to the nurse, but the interaction, the phone call, is sent to the intake specialist. There's always a two-pass process here. Whenever there's an injury, someone takes the details and then they transfer out to a specialist so they can talk about care and their circumstances. So what happens here is that we take the staff, the data information, we send a text to the on-call staff, the data simultaneously, and the call is simultaneously sent to the intake specialist. The intake specialist then gets notification that the nurse has logged in and is ready for the patient. Once the agent intake specialist takes care of the pieces of the puzzle and collecting the data they need to, they can transfer the call directly to the nurse who happens to be on call. The primary benefit for this client, they didn't have to have the nurse, who's a highly skilled technical person and expensive, logged into a queue from 11 p.m. to a 7 a.m. Rather, they were able to reach out and notify nurses or a nurse that's on call that there is an injury and need to make you available. The benefit there is that instead of paying for a full-time staffer from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., you only pay per incident. So it becomes an attractive option for the contact center. It also becomes an extremely attractive option for the on-call person who doesn't have to sit and wait for something to happen. They're notified when something does. And lastly, it provides rotation and it provides flexible staffing opportunities. When you're dealing with professional staff, they're not always wanting to work those shifts. And in the nursing industry is a very specific in particular. You may have folks that want to pick up additional time, maybe not, but they have a very different mindset. This actually bridges the world together and accomplishes things. So this is a way that we were able to use the system in use case 2 to give the customer a more flexible option, the customer being the business while the patient is arriving into the injury center. And the last one, and we have a few minutes here, and we're going to run a couple minutes over, so if you'd like to hang out, I would appreciate it. If not, we will be sending a video and a link to the presentation after this. The next one is automating data entry and the ordering QA process. The problem with a customer is that the client receives thousands of orders via email. The orders are then sent to an agent who needs to manually enter the order requests into their system of record. Each request can take 15 to 20 minutes on average, but sometimes 30 minutes depending on the nature of the request. Ultimately, the problem is that the fulfillment process and order process is slowed down and productivity is an issue. The answer? Send the web form orders to email as they normally do. Also send an email to Genesys Cloud and to an email parsing service. Now we're starting to use external services. Deploy an email parse request web service. So we're building a web service inside Pure Cloud. Then we're going to deploy a Genesys agent desktop script to pull the data from the email parsing service. We're going to present the email to the agent in Genesys Cloud desktop scripting. And now instead of having to do all the data entry, the agent simply responds to the script, reviews the data, and presses go, which does a myriad of things. So here, we create 4 different actions. We want to send a web action to send an email confirmation, a web action to get the email parse data because we're using an external service. So we want to grab that service details. We want to update the details when necessary and then send the order to the order entry CRM or ordering system. So here's an example of a script that I created for the client. It's a very simple, basic script. You're going to see it with an email in a moment, but the point of this script is to grab the details of the customer order, who, what, where, what products, name, address, and request type into an easy form that the agent can read. When the interaction arrives in Pure Cloud, you can see the raw email on the left, but on the right-hand side is the script. Up in the upper right-hand corner, the agent enters the web form, so the only thing they're having to manually enter is the work order number already found in the email. And what is returned on the right are all the details of the order. The agent then slowly goes through the request and the email. On the right-hand side, they confirm that all the data is accurately captured. They can update information where necessary, but ultimately at the bottom of the script, if everything is correct in the order as requested in the email, they hit the button confirm email data. When they hit the confirm email data, it processes the order, sends it to the CRM, sends the customer an email, and it took the agent between 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how much data is on the screen. The interaction is completed, and in this case, you're going to use different wrap codes. And you'll notice on the right, I have a wrap code for email order entry confirmed, email order incomplete, email order rejected. When you're doing things differently, you want to associate the outcome so that it makes sense in a reporting scenario. And ultimately, at the very bottom, the work order data has been confirmed. We get the response on the right-hand side, at the very bottom, you're seeing that the work order has been received by the CRM, and we see that the CRM communicating back. So here's the process. On the far left, now this is a busy one, so hopefully this is helpful and you can think about how it might apply. On the left, the order comes in, and you can see my order is received via email. When the order comes in, it's simultaneously sent to an email address on Genesys Cloud, but also to an email parsing. You can easily do this by making the email parse service either the blind copy or a copy of the recipient email. The email parse service will parse the information it found in the email and throw it into a database, while simultaneously the email is being sent to the agent. The agent receives the email here, and it's populated in their script. In the script, the agent invokes the process to pull the data from the email parse database, populate the fields in their script. Now the agent simply reviews the script and says, okay, everything's correct, or wait a minute, there's a typo here, let me fix that. And then when the agent hits send or confirm, you see 2 actions taking place. The data is entered into the CRM ordering system on the backside through a web service. The customer gets an email notification, your order's been received, or whoever, it can go to a distribution list. The primary benefit here is that it reduces the order data entry process from 15 to 20 minutes or more down to 3 to 5 minutes. The net effect is that agents process more orders, improving the operational fulfillment efficiency, and you've actually changed the agent's job. They're no longer solely relegated to data entry. They become QA specialists. Good data in, good data out, and agents are thrilled when most of the work is done for them. The operation is thrilled because they can produce more results more efficiently. Customers are thrilled because the process happens seamlessly, and that's customer engagement. So in summary, be creative when creating solutions. I'm going to go ahead and build this out. The Genesys Cloud feature set has ample opportunity to really get creative with processes and efficiency flows. With built-in web services plugin, which is easy to use, I use it as a template constantly. Built-in Genesys Data Cloud Actions allows me to look at system awareness. So as I'm looking at routing interactions, I can see if my agent, my target agent is available or not, or make an alternate decision. Once you pull these elements together with agent desktop scripting, you're going to use it to orchestrate the entire manipulation of the process. The last example I gave you was a classic example of how we use multiple pieces to really affect a positive change. With Genesys Cloud Open API, there's really nothing you cannot accomplish. And I say this and have said it for years, with the right tools, I can create whatever I want. So create whatever you want. Think about your solutions. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. So I'll stop here, Luis, to see if we have any questions.
No, we don't have any questions yet.
Great. I'm always available for questions. And if you need to get in contact with us, reach us at the toll-free number listed here, or you can send an email to contact@inflowcommunications.com. I'm always an open book. I'm happy to help people. It does not require any payment. I've offered my services from 15 minutes to 2 hours for clients that are just interested in wanting validation and wanting to get an outsider's thought process and what they can accomplish to solve any obstacles they may have. With that being said, thank you for spending time with me today. I know that it's difficult to break away from the busy operations, especially with everything happening in the world today. I sincerely appreciate the additional time, and I hope to see you on a future webinar.